and thriving water environment.
Motion for debate. The role of schools in caring for the mental health of pupils and assisting in their development as community and family members. Baroness Bennett of Manor Castle.
My Lords, I move that this House take note of the role of schools in caring for the mental health and wellbeing of pupils and assisting in their development as community and family members. I begin by thanking the Library for their excellent briefing setting out the problem, and a standout statistic about the truly terrible state of mental health of school pupils in that briefing is that in November 2023, NHS Digital estimated that 20% of 8 to 16-year-olds had a probable mental health disorder. Now, I thank the significant number of NGOs and campaign groups who sent briefings for the debate, picking out particularly Square Peg, an organisation established by and for those with lived experience of school attendance difficulties, which works in partnership with Not Fine in School. Their existence since 2018 demonstrates how the issue we are discussing today predates the COVID pandemic, while acknowledging that it is undoubtedly magnified issues for pupils, parents and schools. Absence rates were rising 15 to 20% per annum pre-pandemic, while exclusion and suspension rates, off-rolling and deregistrations were also increasing. I wish also to thank very much the noble lords who have signed up for this last Business on Thursday debate, an acknowledgement of the concern around this issue and the desire to examine not just treatment but causes. I look forward to all of your contributions. Now, the origins of this debate lie in alarm following the report in November 2023 by the Children's Commissioner for England. The report found that pupil absence had become endemic at Key Stage 4, with over a third of pupils either persistently or severely absent for at least 1 year. But discussion and debate around those figures has, I'm afraid, from both of the largest parties in our politics, focused on what is wrong with pupils or parents. So the government has launched a national communications campaign called Moments Matter, Attendance Counts, that targets parents and carers, trying to get through to them the importance of attendance on attainment, wellbeing and development. Now, that really seems to ignore the fact that a survey by the youth mental health charity STEM4 found that 28% of 12 to 18-year-olds had not attended school over the last year by reason of anxiety about the experience of attendance. Experts comment that many of them are unable to cope with the school experience. And the prosecuting parents' report reflects that threatening legal action against parents, as often happens, is both pointless and damaging, but that continues all too often to be the response. What will it do, does it do, to a parent-child relationship if the parent or carer is being pressured by the government to force the child to go to school, even when its school is making the child ill? The top Labor response was that it would legislate for a compulsory national register of homeschooled children, who are not, of course, the source of the attendance issue. But rather than focusing on pupils or parents, the Green Party and I want to focus on what's happening in our schools. What are they doing to push pupils, particularly but far from only those from disadvantaged backgrounds and with special educational needs, with disabilities and chronic illness, including long COVID? What's pushing them away, discouraging their attendance? Why are they failing to be attracted to school? Now, there's a whole other issue about the rising levels of poverty and child poverty, which were addressed in the powerful preceding debate today, that's obviously a major contributor. Our society is dysfunctional, and it's failing many, particularly the young. But I'm going to keep the focus today within schools. And there's also a big issue of underfunding, but I'm going to focus on that today, not going to focus on that today, because it so easily descends into a pointless duel of statistics. Now, I want to stress that I'm not blaming hard-working heads and teachers and other staff who operate within a system forced on them, a system that has been ideologically driven over the course of governments of different hues to focus on discipline, on rigid frameworks, on teaching to the test, on regimented, tightly controlled behaviour, on so-called preparation for work. And, of course, I have to mention dealing with the impacts of austerity that saw the most deprived fifths of secondary schools spending per pupil fall by 12% in real terms between 2010 and 2021. But as a former school governor myself, I saw the pressure that heads and teachers were under, the pressure to conform, to test, to push square pegs into round holes. Now, we know that the spread of multi-academy trust schools, independent of local democratic control, and not infrequently with schools forced rather than choosing to join, has been associated with models of rigid discipline, heavy penalties for the slightest infraction, not having a pen, speaking in a corridor, for having the wrong hairdo. A former teacher described it as institutional bullying. And these are schools that are concentrated in more economically deprived, often so-called levelling up areas. A mother shared with me on social media their child's response to the suggestion that school was preparing them for society. But the only place in society that is like school is a prison, the child said. Out of the mouths of babes come some terribly clear truths. Now, one of the things I want to reflect on is back in history and how little schools have changed in the past century. If you set aside the technology of whiteboards and personal tablets, the structure, the system, the perceived purpose of schools is essentially unchanged. The subjects taught and favoured, the external exams, the classes of dozens of pupils of the same age all proceeding together, the idea that this is to prepare pupils for the workplace, the focus on discipline, on uniform, on conformity. All of this would be entirely familiar to a Victorian student. And to what use is that technology put? In initiating discussions about this debate, I learnt in many schools an app records a pupil's demerits, which are also conveyed electronically to parents. How many black marks they've earnt that day. That means how much time they're supposed to spend in detention. What does it do to your mental health to know that when your phone vibrates, you've got another black mark, another perceived failure, another punishment? Now, the Autistic Girls Network shared with me research from 2023 showing that 94% of school attendance cases were underpinned by significant emotional distress. 92% of those children were neurodivergent and 83% were autistic. But of course, as the network pointed out, 80% of autistic girls remain unrecognised at the age of 18, so the numbers will be even higher than that. There is no doubt that children with special educational needs and disabilities are being severely failed by the current system. Now, that's an issue, I'm pleased to say, is very often raised in your Lordship's House. And I'm confident when looking at the speaker list that this is something others in this debate will focus on. So I want to focus on the fact that while many pupils, particularly those who start with advantages in family background and health and well-being, may survive the experience of school, may not show up in the absence statistics or with mental health states sufficient to appear in the medical figures, we should want and expect much more from schools than being something to survive and endure. Now, I focused on the rise in discipline, in rules, in controls over every aspect of pupils' bodies within the school gates. But there's also the question of what, particularly over recent years, has disappeared from schools. I discussed this debate with Rick Page, ex-head teacher of Wordsworth Primary in Southampton, a large inner-city school of 630 children. Over a number of years, when he was head, it developed a 5-strand creative child program, a music department that sent an orchestra to play at the Royal Albert Hall with the Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra, a sports coach team with an office on site with an extensive curriculum, plus after-school and holiday clubs, an environmental studies and forest school teacher teaching within a nature zone, a dance teacher for tap and ballet and to lead the Rock Challenge, an arts focus which included a talented artist scheme with a neighbouring public school, King Edward's. Mr. Page told me attendance, attitude and behaviour were all improved by fostering a real connection with the children's lives and the local community. But since he retired, continual real terms budget cuts and the straitjacket of conformity imposed on schools by Ofsted have seen many significant parts of that lost. That's one school example, but the reality of many. Now, I want to introduce a final theme, which is about the content of education offered in schools, which, as I referred to earlier, has little changed since Victorian times. Now, this comment was inspired by hearing Nehal Bajwa, the Vice President for Liberation and Equality at the National Units of Students, speaking last night. She reflected on how education throughout the system provides education in how our economy, our society, our environment are broken, but fails to provide solutions on how to fix it. We really also think about how we're providing pupils with the ability to deal with the many challenges they're facing in our society, the challenges that we, our generation, have bequeathed to them. I'd add that we have schools that are preparing pupils to be cogs in the assisting economic system, and that is a fate against which many pupils are rebelling. The idea that education is for exams, is for jobs, when it needs to be a complete preparation for life in a fast-changing world, living as citizens, as neighbours, as family and household members, as consumers and contributors to society in multiple ways. How will we tackle the climate emergency and nature crisis, the poverty and inequality of the world, the geopolitical turmoil? That's something that the climate strikers showed us school pupils are fully engaged with. But how are schools helping them to do that? What I heard from those climate strikers being out with them, talking to them, was that they felt that schools were failing them. And indeed, a number of them said to me that they'd had teachers ask them to explain the climate emergency because the teachers themselves didn't feel they had the framework to understand that. And what does the rigid behavioural indoctrination prepare pupils for? Behaving with the efficiency of a robot in an Amazon warehouse, perhaps, or following the script in a call centre? W.B. Yeats said, "Education is not filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire." Yet what we have in the current system all too often is filling school pupils with anxiety and fear, with test answers and rigid routines rather than a love of learning and the capacity to discover and innovate, with the problems of the adult world, but not the sense that they can take control and join with others to solve them. Now, I'd like to provide solutions. So I'm going to finish with a final stream of thought that may be the most radical part of this speech. How do we fix all of this? Well, one part of my answer starts with democracy. We need to restore democratic control over schools, remove the dead centralising hand of Westminster. But more than that, make schools more democratic. The psychologists tell us that to be empowered, in control of your own life, in control of your own body, is crucial to well-being, is a central part of good mental health. That's as true for children as it is for adults. So what do we need? My lords, we're talking about health and well-being. We're talking about helping pupils step out into a difficult world with so many challenges, equipped to live good, healthy, productive lives. What we need are schools that are more democratic, more compassionate and caring and forgiving. Yes, a child forgot a pen, or a child didn't get exactly the right uniform on that morning. How much should that child pay for that? What is the cost of penalising that child heavily? They need to be more accepting of difference, more embedded in their communities and reflective of their communities, not reflective of the will of Westminster. They need to be far richer in art and culture, in physical activity, in play. That's the sort of schools that we need to care for the mental health and well-being of our future generation, to send them out into the world for a healthy, fulfilling and productive life.
The question is that this motion be agreed to.
My Lords, first of all, may I say how all of us today appreciate the fact that the Baroness Bennett managed to achieve this debate, which all of us welcome hugely. And I wanted to say thank you. Could I start by the way of saying I don't consider anything we talk about today is party politics. It's much more important than that. And over many years, my friend, the Right Honourable the Lord Tulik, has spent decades debating how we can hasten the methods of helping this group of people. And I wanted to also say that I've been helped on this particular debate by Professor Vivian Hill. Professor Vivian Hill of University College London is past chair of the British Psychological Society's Division of Educational and Child Psychologists. And we've worked together for many, many years because my grandson is autistic, but that's not a reason. It's much wider than just my grandson. My Lords, while schools can and do play a significant role in supporting the mental health and well-being of all their pupils, head teachers have a significant role in delivering the culture and ethos of their schools. They are facing a significant increase in the number of pupils requiring support, and they can face significant challenges when working with pupils with more severe and complex needs, in particular those with special educational needs, including autism and dyslexia. To support these pupils and their families, they would require access to support from more specialist professional support services like educational psychologists and child and adolescent mental health services, although I'm afraid this support is increasingly rare. My Lords, let me elaborate on the nature of the challenge. There's a great deal of evidence on increasing mental health needs in children and young people. The NHS 2021 data suggests that the rates of probable mental disorders have increased since 2017, reporting an increase from 11.6% in 2017 to 17.4% in 2021, an increase from 11.6% in 2000, reflecting a change from 1 in 9 to 1 in 6 children aged 6 to 16, and the data indicates a similar increase in the 17 to 19-year-olds age range too. The Children's Society Good Childhood Report in 2002 indicates that in the past 3 years, the likelihood of young people having a mental health problem has increased by some 50%, suggesting that now 5 children in a classroom of 30 are likely to have mental health problems. Access to overstretched specialist services like child and adolescent mental health terms is extremely problematical, with 34% of those pupils being referred to NHS services not being accepted into treatment or being placed on waiting lists of 1 to 3 years. We know that in the region of 50% of mental health problems start by age 14, and early proactive and preventive, I like to say preventive is the word, of support is of critical importance and may significantly reduce longer-term needs for the individual and longer-term costs for society. It is a problem that cannot be ignored. The limited access to specialist support or professional guidance for schools and families leaves them struggling to manage complex mental health needs that actually require the knowledge and skills of specialist support services. And by this I mean educational psychologists and CAMs. My Lords, there are huge variations in access to this type of support in different parts of the country, and some areas have little or no access to these services. Whilst the money the DFE is investing in new training contracts for educational psychologists is welcome and very much welcome. However, the numbers who are to be trained are critically short of meeting the current and future demands. My Lords, the recent Department for Education report on the EP workforce in 2003 revealed 88% of local authorities are reporting difficulties in recruiting educational psychologists. A third of local authorities reported difficulties with the retention of educational psychologists. 96% of the local authorities reporting recruitment and or retention issues stated these difficulties have critically affected young people reaching their full potential. This month, the recent comments from the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman 2024 has noted with consternation that the foreseeable educational psychological workforce capacity issues have been decades in the making, decades. And young people and the impact that's had on young people and young people's timely access to education, health and care needs assessment, as well as early intervention and preventative work, puts many of these children and young people, their schools and families at risk of avoidable poor outcomes. My Lords, in summary, if schools are to adequately care for the mental health and well-being of all of their pupils, and in particular those with SEN, they will require access to specialist support from educational psychologists and better access to CAM services. Access to these services will help schools to respond to meet these needs and help prevent pupils' needs from escalating at great detriment to the child and their family and huge cost to society. I finish by saying my noble friend, the Minister, has over many, many years has devoted a great deal of her time to address and hasten change. I know that she has personally cares most deeply for these very special people, of whom many contribute so much to the arts, to the sciences, and to original thinking. Thank you for listening.
My Lords, I would also like to welcome the opportunity to have this debate. I think it's a very important area and one where, to be honest, I think we're at the start of a very long journey in trying to find the appropriate answers. I'm not as pessimistic about the Noble Lady Baroness Bennett about the state of schools. I often find them happy places, and not all is well, and things could be better, but they are not 24,000 miserable institutions throughout the country. And I think for many of our children, it's the only place where their well-being is protected, and they are emotionally stronger and more stable and happier because they go to school every day. But I absolutely accept that that's not true for everyone, and every child matters, and we must do as much as we can to support those children who are falling off the edge. And I wonder why I never discussed issues like this during my 18 years of teaching. It wasn't on our agenda way back then. And I think there's probably two reasons. We are more aware of this area, that children can have mental health problems. And medical science means that we've done more to diagnose this. But I also do agree with Baroness Bennett that pressure has increased. And I think that we need to look at that. And I think in terms of schools, I think there's two questions. Are the schools themselves the cause of some of the worst well-being, the deterioration in well-being? And secondly, are they equipped to support the children where the pressures are coming from outside schools? So how much of it is the school's fault, and how much can schools do to help when pressure is coming from elsewhere? Now, I actually believe that children should be encouraged to do well in examinations. I'm glad I've got mine. They gave me my life chances. And what I know from every statistic is that the children who have not got the exams are the children who have worse opportunities. I'd never apologise for any policy or any teacher, any politician who has a range of policies increased to narrow that divide between those children who succeed exam-wise at school and those that don't. But what is an entirely legitimate question is to say, what has been the cost of that in the way that we structure our schools? And that's what I just wanted to concentrate on from him, because I think there has been a cost, and I think we can do something about it. but we need to be honest and open about it and think very carefully. And I think the problem is not around the higher expectations of all children to do well in their exams. The problem is the levers we use to try to bring that about. And it's beyond doubt that we've made these exams so high pressured and so high risk that they create in the schools, from the head that goes to the teachers, from the teachers that go to the parents, and all that trickles down to the children, that if you don't succeed, you're in trouble and you're a failure. And I do think that that's a problem. I always remember a young child saying to me who'd not done as well in their exams as they thought they would, said to me, "Stell, does that mean that I won't be any good now, that I won't be able to get a job?" And it was actually very difficult in that moment of time to split the conversations. Of course you can. Everyone fails and you learn from it. Because the whole of the pressure prior to that had been, if you don't work hard, you won't get a job. And success is doing A, B or C. So those messages we give to children are really important. Yes, you need your exams. Yes, you should do as well as you can. But no, it's not the end of the world, and it doesn't mean you're a worse person if you don't actually do as well as you might. And the second thing where I did want very much to agree with Baroness Bennett is there's no doubt at all that two things have happened. Those things that can help well-being, like art, creativity, sport, time to think, space to talk, time to build good relationships, have got squeezed out of schools. And even where they're not squeezed out of schools, teachers don't think they're valued. And both those things are a huge problem. We've got teachers who are trying to do those things. I see so much wonderful creativity and arts in school. And you scratch your head and think, well, I thought all that was gone. It's not valued. And because they think government and others don't value it, I think that becomes a problem. So I think there's more to be done, but I wouldn't want to go back to any glory days when the division between the successes and the failures was very much both sex discriminated and social class discriminated. What I wanted to go on to is look at schools themselves as institutions that can support children who may have issues with mental health from pressures outside schools. And that can be from social media, from drugs, from fragmented communities, from families who don't have the skills to help their children. And I think schools are absolutely key in this. They are the place where most children go and where trust is greatest, probably after the childhood medical service. So I think the second thing that we need to address is, have we got the workforce in those schools to actually deliver that task? And there's so much more that could be done. If you look at the staffing of any school, you'll probably find that almost all, but not all, almost all, are people's employed to bring about academic progress and academic success. And we need a better balance and skill set within schools. I'd like to go into schools and find that we've got those teachers whose job it is to get the children through the exams, but there's people who've got time to talk, people who've got time to work magic, people who've got time to take the kids out, people who've got time to talk about spiritual things, people who've got the skills and the qualifications in mental health. Not necessarily all the time highly qualified psychologists, but people whose job it is to do early intervention and have those first signs of support for young children. And that's, I think, where the problem lies, is that I suppose years and years and years ago, schools were part of their communities. All the families, especially in village communities, went to their school, often neighbourhood to the church, and it was a tight community where everyone knew what was going on. And whatever you think about it, parental choice and a move now to doing better means that that community built around a school has broken down. Well, it has, but it doesn't mean that we can't use that school as a base and a community for the people who it serves. It just means that we need to do it in a very different way. I wanted to just finish by acknowledging the work that the government has done on mental health support teams. I don't think they've done anywhere near enough on the curriculum like PSH and citizenship, but that's for another day. I do like the mental health support teams, but and I declare an interest with the Birmingham Education Partnership, who are in charge of managing or promoting some of these. But what I would say is 2 points. Is I worry that they might be seen as a substitute for people with long served and well-earned qualifications, and it really is too slow. we're only covering 35% of the pupils 6 years after the start of the initiative. It needs to be better, it needs to be faster. If the Minister might be able to tell us when it be rolled out nationally, I think that would be helpful.
My Lords, can I also thank Baroness Bennett for bringing this important debate and those who are speaking today. Improving mental health and well-being of our children in school is one of the most important issues that all of us must work on together. The early years, a good experience of education, the ability to learn, grow and develop in a safe and secure environment is essential to success in future life. Our children need to be resilient. Good mental health is a prerequisite to learning, as it is for good attendance at school. An ill child is no more capable of learning than a cheese grater is of being a water glass. Our schools must be warm, welcoming, adaptable and inclusive spaces. Schools are ideal settings for providing our children with mental health support. Baroness Hollis put it in a previous debate when she said very well, thinking about children's school environment, we need to develop a culture of nurture as a foundation for learning. We need proper funding and resources and a whole school approach. First and foremost, we must deal with the immediate crisis. I held my own debate in November on the current state of mental health support for children and young people in England. I declared my personal interest as a parent of a child who has gone through long periods of poor mental health, saying it was one of the most challenging periods of my life and that no parent ever wants to see their child unable to keep themselves safe. My knowledge and experience in these matters is as a parent. The scale of the mental health problem is huge, and it disproportionately affects those in poverty and is made worse by the lack of resources available to resolve it. The most recent key findings from the NHS Digital Survey shows that 1 in 5 of our young people aged 8 to 25 had a probable mental health disorder. Rates remain at elevated levels following the pandemic, and for 17 to 25-year-olds, rates were twice as high for young women as they were for young men. We are treating double the numbers of children and young people with eating disorders who need urgent care than we were before the pandemic. We have huge waits for services, with treatment for even immediate and urgent cases often effectively being denied. We face a children and young people's mental health emergency, and we must all work together to end the wait. The House spoke clearly with one urgent voice on these issues, and I think it will again today. I have called on the Government to accelerate the rollout of mental health support hubs to all schools and colleges nationwide. This is the quickest and most effective form of help. I asked the Government to commit to bring forward their target of 50% access by 2024-25 and make it 100%. Marina Wilson, in the other place, has brought forward a private member's bill, and I'm delighted that my party have put forward proposals to have dedicated mental health professionals in all state-funded schools and to pay for this through a trebling of the digital services tax. Place to Be have calculated that for every £1 invested in primary schools-based mental health provision, this money will generate £8 in economic and social benefits. The response from the Minister at the time of my last debate was positive. However, since then, nothing has happened. So can I kindly ask the Minister why there has been no movement from the Government on these issues? The urgency and the needs are clear, and the costs are not great. So can I ask the Minister, are there practical problems with accelerating this policy? Is it about not being able to find and train staff in time, or are there other practical matters? I also want to just quickly say a few words on long-term persistent absence. When my child was ill, she was off school for very long, prolonged periods of time, and with very poor attendance at others. I know just what it is like, and just how challenging it can be when your child is not well enough to keep themselves safe, let alone attend school. The struggle every morning trying to get them out of bed. I understand how we have got into this position as well. COVID caused an explosion in mental health issues, and we need to better understand why that is. But it does show that our children and young people are lacking the resilience they so desperately need. As a result of the increase in poor mental health, the lack of treatment availability, absence rates invariably rose, and the government and schools rightly wanted to bring those back down. My personal perception is that, though, that it's swung too far, that finding parents should be an absolute last resort. The parent of any child that is waiting for treatment for mental health issues or is unable to get a diagnosis for autism or other special needs should not be facing these fines, and that actually there needs to be far more cooperation between schools and parents in terms of trying to get those children who are suffering back into school. The Children's Commissioner has also pointed out the issue and called it the issue of our time, and again, like me, she calls for the acceleration of the rollout of mental health hubs to be accelerated by the government. While the cause of persistent absence from schools are complex, one key factor is the lack of mental health support. I would like to ask the Minister about the connections between the number of children that have been waiting over a month for mental health support from CAMHS, and ask the government, do they keep statistics? Do they cross-reference those statistics for those children who are waiting for treatment against those children who are also long-term persistently absent from school? I do think it is really, really important that the government does cross-reference these two so that they can better understand whether it is a denial of treatment for mental health that is one of the key drivers in long-term persistent absence from school. To end my speech, I just finally call on the government again to please take more urgent action on these matters. I do recognise the progress and the action the government has made, but more does need to be done urgently to protect our children and young people.
My Lords, it's a pleasure to speak in this debate, and I pay tribute to the noble Lady Baroness Bennett for focusing her seemingly inexhaustible energies on this important topic. It is a complex topic that invites multiple approaches. I intend to focus rather narrowly in one area, and given that intended focus, I must start by declaring my interest, as noted in the register. Of particular relevance to this debate is my role as chair of an expert advisory panel convened by government to offer non-binding advice to DCMS and DFE on the development of their plan for cultural education. My own education was far from usual in that I entered professional training at the age of 11 as a student at the Royal Ballet School. But I will always count myself fortunate to have been educated in a place where there was never any sense that art was an extra, a nice to have, or peripheral to the main purpose. Art and arts-based approaches were integrated throughout a broad-based education that would equip us with a set of skills as important in life as they are in dance: curiosity, courage, perseverance, confidence, teamwork, personal responsibility, and a creative hinterland on which to draw. Over the years, my increasing awareness of just how effectively that arts-enriched education prepared me for life beyond the stage has inspired an ongoing quest to better understand the role of arts, culture, and creativity in personal and social development, in educational attainment, and in health and well-being. And it's a field of research that's blossomed over recent decades. In 2016, the AHRC published a landmark report, The Value of Arts and Culture, which analysed, among other things, how arts engagement contributes to community cohesion, civic engagement, and educational attainment. 3 years later, the World Health Organization published the largest report to date on the underlying evidence base for the contribution of arts and culture to health and well-being. And of particular relevance to this debate, the report found strong evidence of a positive correlation between arts engagement and the social determinants of health, child development, and healthy behaviours. Alongside evidence that childhood engagement in arts activities can predict academic performance across the school years, the report's authors also found that it promotes pro-social classroom and playground behaviour. It enhances emotional competence and reduces bullying. And the behavioural benefits are shown to extend to groups with diverse needs. children from less advantaged backgrounds, those with social, emotional and behavioural difficulties, those with physical or learning disabilities experience reductions in anxiety, depression or aggression, with associated improvements in self-esteem, confidence, communication and personal empowerment. The authors also report a sizable literature on art's role in building social and community capital, in fostering cooperation across different cultures, reducing prejudice, enhancing social consciousness, and increasing civic behaviours like voting and volunteering. Dr. Daisy Fancourt, one of the authors of the report, has worked forensically over many years to investigate the ways in which these outcomes occur, how the component elements of arts activities trigger psychological, physiological, social and behavioural responses that are themselves causally linked with positive health and well-being outcomes. And in addressing the question the Noble Lady Baroness Bennett has introduced today, it's worth considering each of these in turn. Fancourt's work points to how the aesthetic and the emotional components of art provide opportunities for understanding and exploring emotions. They allow opportunities for emotional regulation, for stress reduction, and all of these are key to how we manage mental health. The cognitive stimulation in art supports learning and skills development, which is beneficial in itself, but it's also interrelated with mental illnesses like depression. Group interactions through arts activities improve social capital. They reduce prejudice and discrimination between different groups. And then the physicality of arts activities reduces sedentary behaviours, improving fitness, flexibility, bone health, and of course linking to reductions in depression. This is what the research tells us. Schools taking part in the ArtsMark programme show us what this looks like in action. ArtsMark offers schools a framework and support to embed creativity across the curriculum, addressing school improvement priorities. 89% of ArtsMark schools report improvements in pupils' well-being and resilience. They point to positive impacts on mental health, enhanced intercultural understanding, and stronger connections forged between staff, pupils, families, and local communities. Schools also report improvements to punctuality, student engagement and attendance, underlying the important point noted earlier by the Noble Lady Baroness Bennett of creating environments that encourage children and their parents to engage with school. Partnership working is key to success, and in the best case scenarios, a network of commissioners, providers and agencies across education, culture, voluntary and faith sectors, as well as local authorities, work together to provide children with rich, culturally diverse and locally connected arts opportunities. I urge the Noble Lady, the Minister, to follow the progress of Culture Start, a 3-year city-based cross-sector partnership launching this year in Sunderland, which will span social housing, the voluntary, cultural and youth sectors, as well as education, to provide young people with cultural experiences that help to mitigate some of the impacts of growing up in poverty. My Lords, research and lived experience demonstrates how arts activities and experiences can support schools in caring for the mental health and well-being of children and in fostering family and community connections. The evidence is clear, the outcomes are evident. There are, of course, other routes for children to access arts activities, both at home and in the community. But if we want all children to enjoy the developmental, educational, and social benefits associated with arts engagement, then school, a universal experience, is surely the best route to ensure universal access. I know that in responding, the Noble Lady the Minister will reiterate her commitment to ensuring all children have access to these opportunities through education. I'll finish by welcoming that commitment in advance.
Yeah. My Lords, I want to also extend my gratitude to Baroness Bennett for initiating this vital debate and declare my interest as a parent of both home and state-educated children and as a board member of an organisation committed to providing private education. We're at a critical juncture where the mental health challenges facing our youth have intensified, notably since the pandemic, as others have pointed out. Just this month, the Royal College of Psychiatrists said there had been a 53% increase in the number of children in mental health crisis over the last 4 years. This situation is exacerbated by a schooling environment in which most GCSEs now are tested in exams only. This, coupled with limited resources, has severely hampered schools' ability to support those with neurodiversity and SEN effectively, as well as other pupils struggling generally with mental health challenges. It's heartening to see the government's introduction of mental health support teams and the provision of funding for training leads. This is a commendable step towards embedding mental health support within our educational framework. However, the reach of these initiatives needs expansion, given it will still only be available eventually to half of all schools, and all schools are still limited to the degree to which they can help children with particularly acute needs. It's essential that this support becomes a staple across all schools, ensuring no child is left without the necessary mental health resources they need at whatever intensity of need they have. I want to, of course, pay tribute to the many schools and teachers who do such a great job, in spite of all of this, helping where they can. However, I now want to focus my remarks on the school pathways for parents and children dealing with mental health episodes, which, from those I have spoken to and interacted with, is too often confusing, complex and traumatic on top of the high levels of stress families feel because of the issues they have to deal with, and sometimes indeed the bullying that accompanies it. The pathways need clarification and simplification and need to become more collaborative rather than confrontational, offering support rather than exacerbating stress and anxiety. Too often parents find the imperative schools have to keep children in school, have them perform in and for exams, and manage limited resources and attention to get the bulk of their pupils moving forwards, conflicts with the individualised and tailored attention and support needed by pupils facing mental health challenges. In a number of cases, parents decide to remove their children from a school environment which is sometimes not sufficiently supportive, or which the child refuses to go to, and or in which they face bullying. At this point, the parents face a number of hurdles. Attempts can often be made to keep the child in school attendance, even if it might not be in the child's best interests or aid their well-being, so that the school, trust and local authority can maintain their targets, sometimes with the threat of prosecution or fines, and where the family can often feel mistreated like criminals. I find many families currently seeing home education as their only escape from such a system in such scenarios that doesn't adequately cater to their needs, because it seems to them the only legal way to move forwards without harassment, short of moving house to another locality. This choice, often made in desperation, should prompt us to reflect on how we can make even more of our schools more neuro-inclusive and supportive environments, rather than ones which have to enforce rules which may not apply or be particularly helpful in such circumstances. I'm furthermore saddened that rather than dealing with the causes of such absences and the growth of home education as a result of that crisis, the government and other stakeholders are considering implementing registers for out-of-school children, which would further add stress to those families who've chosen to go down that route. It would be wiser to sort out the lack of support and empathy when families have to endure mental health and special needs challenges in schools, signpost multiple paths, including but not just home education, to provide temporary respite and formulate a plan that may or may not involve the former school or not, and provide advice and support and training if home education were the chosen path, rather than to create a situation where those who've taken their children out of school are automatically assumed to be criminal, to be suspected of neglect, or any number of crimes, where for many their only desire is to ultimately see their child well and succeed and be restored. In closing, I want to therefore pose a number of critical questions to my noble friend the Minister. Firstly, will there be an investigation into the reliance on home education as the only legitimate escape route for parents seeking to protect their children from a system that sometimes can feel to them adversarial, and work done to clarify the pathways out of an unsustainable school environment that's more supportive and which suspecting parents or child are not the first resort? Second, in light of the recent trends in school attendance and the new challenges post-COVID, which look like a result largely of COVID primarily at the moment, given that attendance is now rising again, is there a plan for an emergency support package specifically targeted at the most affected student cohorts, those most affected in 2020 onwards? Thirdly, what support is planned for these children and families with mental health challenges and additional needs who are out of formal school context, given sometimes you need to help them when they are either being home educated or in an in-between situation, at home or in another non-school context? And will funding be released for families to access trained support from either local authorities or trusted charities without being pursued for absences in those situations. My Lords, our commitment to the mental health and well-being of our pupils is a testament to our dedication to their future and the future of our society. Let's ensure our actions reflect this commitment, fostering an environment where every child feels, when they face mental health challenges, supported, understood and valued, whether formally in school or not.
My Lords, I join colleagues in thanking Baroness Bennett for securing this debate. It's very important, very helpful that we are discussing these matters. Earlier this month, many organisations sought to raise the profile of children with mental health during Children's Mental Health Week. Indeed, the charity Place to Be took the theme, My Voice Matters, using the opportunity to urge the government to give children and young people the support, the tools and the confidence they need. Confidence to be proud of themselves, yes, but I think more, confidence to believe in themselves. And I've always thought believing in oneself is the beginning of self-confidence. And I've known cases where this lack of confidence among young school children in particular has been put down to shyness. It's simply thought as something that will pass in time, but it often, my Lords, hides other problems. In quite a few cases, the underlying problem, which left unrecognised, can lead to many crises in later life. And this is why mental health support should start early on in a child's life. It should start at school. For so many children, school is the first time in their lives that they've been away from the home and family environment. The first time they spent a whole day with other children and adults they did not know. 250,000 children in the United Kingdom are believed to have mental health problems. We face a major challenge in ensuring they receive the support needed to enjoy the quality of life that those of us in this chamber would all take for granted. Many are denied help by a National Health Service that's struggling to manage surging caseloads against a backdrop of a crisis in child mental health. Some health trusts in our country are failing to offer treatment up to 60% of those referred by GPs. Health Service figures released last November show that 1 in 5 children and young people in England have a probable mental health problem. So surely, my Lords, the time to begin supporting these young people is when they begin at school. And let me take, if I may, one area of concern, and that is speech and language. Yeah. I have some experience of families with children whose lack of speech is a cause of concern. The charity Speech and Language UK tell me that a child with speech and language problems is twice as likely to have mental health problems as their peers. Why is this? Well, their research shows that there may be anxiety or frustration caused by not understanding what people are saying or not being understood themselves. That can sometimes be the case with children with autism, as I know as a Vice President with our noble friend, Vice President of the National Autistic Society, together with our noble friend Baroness Browning. They may struggle socially at nursery and consequently have low esteem. They may have difficulty with thinking things through and working out what might happen and do not understand the consequences and implications of their actions. They might be feeling socially isolated because they have poor communication skills. Their difficulties with language and communication might not have been recognised, so they're not getting the help and support they need. My Lords, the best thing we can do to help is to make sure these problems are recognised early and the proper help is put in place. This means teachers and early years practitioners should receive training on how to help a child develop their talking and understanding of words. Pretty basic. This will also help identify a child who is struggling. They should also know where to refer them for further support and diagnosis. There's no good discovering something and not knowing how to get it treated and supported. Schools need to be able to measure and track children's talking and understanding of words in the same way we do that with literacy and numeracy. We need a free tool that can be used at the start of Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 by class teachers so that they can spot a child who is struggling. Currently, schools must pay to do this. They must pay to actually do this. Teachers need to know what's available to help children with speech and language challenges. We need guidance about what evidence-based tools and interventions work best and which might be most appropriate in each school. and there needs to be better recognition by child and adolescent mental health services of the high proportion of children with mental health problems who have speech and language challenges. Staff need to be trained on how to help children struggling with their mental health and to find out what works best for them. My noble friend Baroness Morris of Yardley and the noble Lord Earl Russell spoke about mental support teams. The Children's Commissioner for England, Dame Rachel de Souza, has called for every school in the country to have a mental health team in place by 2025. Perhaps in responding, the noble lady might be able to tell us if the government is working towards that and agrees with it. My lords, I appreciate that I've covered a fair number of points here, and I would be more than content if the noble lady, the Minister, having had time to reflect, would want to write to me. But might I end by asking her that she might also consider meeting Speech and Language UK, the charity I've spoken about, because together they might help us find some of the solutions to the problems we're facing.
My Lords, I too am grateful to Baroness Bennett of Manor Castle for sponsoring this debate on a matter of great importance for the future life of our nation, and also for the challenging sensitivity and issues she laid out for us in her introduction. The Church of England's schools now educate just over 1 million children, around 20% of the country's education provision. Its current vision for education, published in 2016, is for an education system that promotes life in all its fullness, a phrase used by Jesus Christ in St. John's Gospel, which invites a holistic approach to education, considering the material, cultural, social and spiritual dimensions of human existence and the wisdom with which we use the gifts God has given us. In the Diocese of Chichester, where I serve, our schools serve the many coastal towns of Sussex with their distinctive blend of tourism and of deep deprivation, as well as serving the extensive rural areas where small village schools play a vital role in the way that the noble lady Baroness Morris has already identified. We will not be alone in Chichester in forging partnerships in our church schools in the use of the NHS mental health support teams. And again, I would like to pay tribute to the importance of that and also to what it's enabled us to do in developing home school church networks and building a vital work where the life of school and the life of home are brought into interaction with each other. And also making it possible to find better ways of supporting children who are suffering with mental health. This NHS partnership has also opened up another partnership for us through a diocesan multi-academy trust that's working with the University of Sussex to assess the impact of the COVID pandemic. And among the things that are emerging there, the questions about what the impact now of working from home is and what impact that might be having on attendance of children at school. And also looking at the impact of social media, which expanded for many children during the lockdown, but now asking questions about the extent to which cell phone use, for example, might need to be more carefully restricted in schools. My Lords, I'd like to make reference also to the independent sector of education, which is well represented in Sussex, and which faces many of the same challenges among the pupil body, but often with greater resources for meeting them. And there's just one aspect of this that I wish to draw attention to, since it indicates, as already been stated, a loss from the maintained sector, and that is the need of provision of the arts, especially music, as a non-word-based medium that makes articulation of the deepest feelings for children who might struggle with words much easier. This can be especially true for pupils who experience the trauma of violence and abuse, as it can for neurodiverse pupils or those with learning difficulties or for those for whom English is not their first language. And the comments made by the noble Lady Ball also have outlined in greater detail these important points. It's an area that Brighton College has developed remarkably well and has also been able to use it as a way of welcoming Ukrainian refugees into its life. It's also been used by them for forging a strong partnership with schools in the East End of London. But the model speaks to us about something which has been done and shown to be of enormous value, and which surely also belongs to the right of all children as part of their school experience, and especially those children with special needs. Reference to the importance of wider influences that contribute to the educational life of young people is also evident in a recent study undertaken by the University of Leeds, which indicates that when fathers engage in multiple types of structured activities several times a week, it helps to enrich a child's cognitive and language development. This raises important questions about the role of fathers in parenting, and also their absence physically, emotionally, economically, and the subconscious impact that this might have on their children. From a government perspective, my lords, might this suggest that it would be worth giving attention to the gender balance of the teaching profession and encouraging an increase in male teachers, especially in the primary school sector? My Lord, these observations indicate the intensity of the context in which education is delivered today by a remarkably dedicated profession of teachers and classroom assistants who face complex human needs that have to be addressed before other aspects of learning can take place. Sustaining that profession with adequate resources through the recruitment of people of high calibre, remuneration that is commensurate with the skills we expect of them, and public recognition of their important work is surely one of the best contributions that the government can make to the mental, intellectual and spiritual well-being of our children and young people in their schools.
My Lords, I would like to join the chorus of thanks to Baronet Bennett of Barnard Castle for tabling this debate and again pay tribute to her boundless energy. I'd love to actually have the opportunity to show her around the school where I teach as well, because I didn't recognise, we have a very high standard of discipline, I didn't recognise the institutional bullying that seems to go on, so I would love that opportunity if I may, and at that point I must, as ever, declare my interest as a secondary school teacher in a state school in London. It's always an honour to follow the Right Reverend Prelate, the Bishop of Chichester, with its very thoughtful ideas. But, my lords, there's no point in talking about the role of schools if the children aren't in schools. 1.8 million children are persistently absent. As Baroness Morris of Yardley said, for a lot that's the only place where their well-being is protected, and it is so important we get them in there. The Royal College of GPs advise that now that mild or moderate anxiety, while sometimes difficult emotions, can be a normal part of growing up for many children and young people, and we need to get them back. Mild anxiety becomes anxiety. Nobody wants to go to school on a Monday morning. That leads to bigger things. I would be very interested to hear what the government is doing, rather than being fairly punitive with parents and schools, about engaging students, getting them back in. Anybody is better off in a school. Schools where you can triage students. They can be sent towards CAMS, they can be sent towards MHSTs. If they've been previously diagnosed, if not, at school, these all need to be funded properly. I talked about before about the playground. Teachers are very, very good at spotting things, whether that's bullying, whether that's changes in behaviour, and again, they can triage, they can get the professionals in. Children are social animals. They need school. This is where they build up all these techniques to get them through life. We need them back. SEN needs to be dealt with. Again, that is dealt with at school, in a bedroom. It is very, very difficult to spot a symptom. There are also external influences we need to look at. The very, very good charity Tom's Trust provides mental health, well-being and psychological support for 536 children with brain tumours and their families, who are about 1,600 of them. Children at school might have a very sick sibling. It might be invisible. I have to declare an interest there. The founder of Tom's Trust, Debs Mitchell, is a great friend of mine. We underestimate all this, but schools can do more as well, obviously. The curriculum needs to change, and how many times have I stood up and said this in my short career here? The House of Lords Education for 11 to 16-year-olds Committee published its final report in December 2023 with many excellent recommendations, pretty much of which all of them the government has just rejected. Lord Johnson, the chairman of the committee, said in yesterday's Times, the government's attempts to create a 1950s curriculum is of little help to many disadvantaged school children. Like many people here have said, we need more fun in schools. We need schools to be the places where children want to go and teachers want to teach. We have this Victorian idea. I mean, we're blaming the Victorians for a lot of things. This beautiful building is not one of them. But we have this Victorian idea that education should be a grind, that medicine should taste horrible, that food is just to sustain you. School should be fun. And I'm going to play to the noble lady of the ministers what's something I really know she's going to prove of here: sport. Nobody's talked about sport. Team games. We need 2 hours plus for every student every week. Nothing like getting muddy, bloody, possibly violent to make you feel better. Swimming, I adore swimming. Obviously, it's a difficult one. I defy anybody to get into a pond, swim in cold water, and remember what problem they went in the first place. Singing, we've all talked about singing. A load of students in a room singing together. What can be better? Young Enterprise, the very wonderful charity Young Enterprise, have a series of lessons specifically aimed at mental health and money management called Money on My Mind. That should be in the curriculum. My school, the school where I teach, we've actually reduced the amount of GCSEs so that students can take subjects like art without having to take the exam at the end, without having to do the coursework. They can just do it for fun and give the students more headspace. But to do that, we need teachers who are confident, who are rested, who feel valued. If their mental health is good, then they are confident and happy, and that goes through all their relationships. We all know what happens to relationships if you are tired and stressed. We need a confidence reset for children. Again, Dame Rachel D'Souza got quoted. I'm going to quote her in The Big Ask, The Big Answer. If adults to learn one thing from this report, it should be as follows. This is not a snowflake generation. It is a heroic generation. But we need them to know that.
My Lords, I would like to add my congratulations to Baroness Bennett on securing this debate. We've had a number of debates on children's mental health in recent times, and the role of school always features. But today's debate, I think, challenges to think about the wider role of schools in relation to children's well-being and confronts the perennial question of what is the purpose of education. Is it simply about academic attainment and preparation for the world of work? Is it also about preparing young people more widely for adulthood, including how they fulfil their potential in all spheres of life, become full citizens in our society and build healthy relationships? And is it also about providing the skills to build their own personal resilience and emotional well-being to help deal with the knocks that life inevitably brings? The answer, of course, is a combination of that, but not everyone will agree on the precise mix. Now, it might be trite to say that growing up in the modern day world feels a lot more complicated with a whole new range of pitfalls to navigate, but I think it's true. It's clear young people face increasing pressures from the academic environment, the growing influence of social media in the online world, and the lasting impact of the pandemic. I was particularly struck by a quote from one young person in some research conducted for the Mental Health Foundation, which said, "The advent of technology, whilst offering unprecedented connectivity, also introduces new stressors as individuals grapple with the constant pressure to meet online standards and portray an idealised version of their lives. And I think it's worth reminding ourselves that last year's Good Childhood report, already referred to, focused on children and young people's experience of schools. Frankly, it didn't make for comfortable reading, with more children and young people unhappy with school than with the other 9 aspects of life they were asked about. But, my lords, schools, both primary and secondary, have a hugely important role to play here, and I think have great potential to be a protective factor for mental health. But sadly, that is not how too many young people feel about school. In a recent survey by Young Minds of more than 14,000 young people, only 3% said educational settings are a positive influence on their mental health, whilst 59% said school or college had affected them negatively in some way. So, my lords, what's going on? I mean, as we've already heard today, many schools have become heavily focused on exam results, and pressure to do well exams can be overwhelming for some young people. Now, fundamentally, I believe a whole school approach is needed, which creates a school cultural environment that has well-being at its core, where mental health and well-being is both promoted and protected, and includes all pupils, students, teachers and staff members. And this only happens, in my experience, when school leadership in the school are actively engaged and championing this work. It means ensuring every adult who interacts with a child has the knowledge, understanding and wherewithal to support them. Now, of course, parents and carers play a key role in teaching children and young people how to understand and manage the feelings as they grow up, and I would like to see more support in this area. And in school, we know that staff are often the first point of contact for a young person struggling with their mental health, hence the need that they are provided with the knowledge and understanding around behaviour and mental health and how to identify when a child is struggling. My lords, an independent study from NatSen on adolescent mental health and educational attainment observed a strong association between mental health difficulties between the ages of 11 and 14 and later academic attainment at age 16. The study found that children experiencing poor mental health are 3 times less likely than their peers to pass 5 GCSEs. Now, most schools understand this link, I'm sure, but it seems to me crucial that mental health issues aren't viewed as yet another problem issue that they're forced to deal with. It's about creating the very foundations for learning and academic success. Furthermore, exclusion from school is strongly related to poor mental health in children and young people, so I think we should be concerned that rates of exclusion from school have increased in the last 5 years. And I was interested to read a recent study that on average, children who have experienced at least one fixed-term period exclusion in the year before attending counselling lost significantly fewer school sessions to exclusion in the year they had counselling. And that was from Place to Be, who operate, the charity operate in many schools, providing drop-in sessions, family work and one-to-one counselling for those with more complex issues. And their analysis of pupils receiving counselling indicates that consistently poor mental health over time was associated with higher levels of persistent absence, which we heard about earlier, whereas improving or consistent good or improving mental health was often associated with lower levels of persistent absence. And their findings also suggest that strengthening children's engagement and enjoyment in school over time was associated with reduced persistent absence. My lords, I think the same can be said about bullying, but I haven't really got time to go into that now. But preventing mental health problems arising in the first place is absolutely key. When support is available in school in a non-stigmatising format, young people benefit. Certainly young people themselves have talked about the need for safe spaces at schools and safe conversations. So by intervening early, building resilience and nurturing a positive understanding of emotions and well-being, young people learn lifelong skills so that their problems don't grow with them. And this can be done through whole classwork, lessons, curriculum, and critically needs to start at primary school age, where I think we don't give enough attention. Finally, my lords, I want to turn to mental health support teams. We've already heard quite a bit about them, and I've always supported them, but argued with many others that rollout should have proceeded at a much faster pace. As we've heard, the current plans, there's only funding, I think, to achieve a 50% coverage of schools by 2025, leaving, over half of schools, and particularly primary schools, uncovered, and pupils without the support they need. Now, to be clear, they are welcome and they're an important part of the jigsaw of mental health support, but they only go so far. I will have a lot more to say on this subject next Friday at the second reading of my private member's bill, particularly my concern about children urgently needing mental health support who meet neither the mental health support team's mild to moderate criteria nor the criteria of specialist CAM support with its very high access thresholds and extremely long waiting lists. So watch this space.
My Lords, I'd like to thank Baroness Bennett of Manor Castle for raising this important debate. We've been presented with some alarming statistics. 1 in 5 8 to 16-year-olds has a probable mental disorder. There has been a 53% increase in the number of children in mental health crisis over the past 4 years. We understand that the government wants to establish mental health support teams, which will undoubtedly help. However, my Lords, please can I suggest that prevention is better than cure. It should be possible to prevent manifold mental health problems amongst our school children before they become major issues. The foundation to this well-being is based on 4 pillars to the school education system in this order of priority: food education, physical education, financial education, and academic education. I've intentionally left academic education as the last pillar because being academically capable does not necessarily mean you'll be happy and make a success of your life. However, being well educated on key life decisions involving food choice, physical health, and financial matters will incrementally increase your chances of a fulfilling life. I'm sure that many noble lords are familiar with the phrase gut instinct. The gut is our second brain. It uses the same chemicals and cells as our main brain. Food changes our mind and our mental health. There is a direct correlation between healthy diet and cognitive learning. Food education should therefore be the cornerstone pillar of a decent school programme which will promote good mental health. And the beauty of this is that we already have a strategy in place which works. Charities like Chefs in Schools have a mission to transform school food and food education and are training kitchen teams to serve fine school lunches. The benefits to schools are wide-ranging, and I quote, "Research shows great school food makes obesity fall, while health, well-being and attainment increase." This is a tried and tested opportunity that is there for the taking by all schools. They need to reach out, and for the benefit of the register, I have no association with this charity, but my beliefs and their aims are aligned. When it comes to physical education, Sport England's latest survey estimated that only 47% of children and young people were meeting the Chief Medical Officer's guidelines of taking part in sport and physical activity for an average of 60 minutes or more every day. Sport and physical activity can change children's lives. It improves cognitive abilities, it boosts concentration, improves classroom conduct and behaviour, not to mention physical and mental health, which in turn encourages their development as community and family members. Physical exercise should be the second pillar of their education. Schools must involve parents and the community in this journey. They need to understand the benefits of physical exercise if they are to enforce home rules on limiting screen time and taking exercise outside, as well as doing more physical exercise at school. Teacher training is key. We have to help the teachers themselves learn how to best promote an active lifestyle, make physical education engaging, and how to combine learning with physical activity. Children can benefit from physical exercise even before their first class of the day. The central target in the government's cycling and walking investment strategy is that half of urban journeys should be walked or cycled by 2030. Cycling to school is a fantastic way for children to exercise and contribute to those required 60 minutes per day. It can be a community event involving both parents and classmates. And the third pillar, my lords, financial education. In a recent survey, 47% of children from low-income families said they worry about their family's finances, which is adding to their stress levels and in turn presenting itself through challenging behaviours at home and at school. Financial insecurity leads to anxiety, stress and depression, but financial education at an early age will help to mitigate these risks. And finally, my lords, I believe the recently issued mobile phones in schools guidance, which backs head teachers in prohibiting the use of mobile phones throughout the school day, can play a key part in caring for the mental health and well-being of school children. The school environment should be a place for the learning of the 4 pillars as I've outlined, and for face-to-face social interaction, not mobile to mobile. I'd therefore like to ask the Noble Lord the Minister, what is the government doing to educate both children and school teachers on how to cook, how to eat well, and how to make healthy food choices? What can the government do to work with charities like Cooks for Schools? On physical education, what is the government doing to involve parents and community in the journey? What teacher training is taking place? And will the government commit to revisiting the decision to cut funding for walking and cycling schemes as part of the cycling and walking investment strategy? And with financial education, how will the government make this a cornerstone of a school education?
My Lords, I'm grateful to Baroness Bennett of Manor Castle for her stimulating and challenging speech to introduce this very interesting debate. My thanks too to the House Library and to the several organisations who've provided most helpful briefings, all pointing regrettably to the increasing mental problems amongst children and young people. And I won't repeat the catalogue of problems that many others have covered. I was going to say that one issue that had not been covered, but it has now been covered by Earl Effingham, relates to the effect of diet and its impact on children and young people and their mental well-being. I've raised this topic, and I'm sure the Noble Lady the Minister is not surprised I'm once again raising it, that it is a very significant issue on which action still needs to be taken, and that is about the quality of school meals. My concern, and that of many others, is that one of the factors that greatly influences the conduct of children is sugar, and the high incidence of sugar that we now have around, and particularly there's, in the view of many people, an over-high incidence of sugar in school meals, and that is why some of us have been pressing for quite some time that the long overdue review of the regulations relating to school meals should be undertaken. The last time I raised it, the Noble Lady said she would take it back to her department. I'm sure she has done that, and I'm wondering, as she returns today from her department, whether she is bringing some good news for us to let us know that the last review that took place in 2014, we're now going to get one underway in 2024. If she's not in a position to do that, I can tell her that the new select committee, special select committee, which has been established in the House to look at diet and obesity, met this morning for its 4th time. We had before us Henry Dimbleby giving evidence. He has, of course, been the former UK government czar at DEFRA, brought in by the government to help them with their problems over diet farming-related issues and food generally and obesity, but resigned in somewhat disgusted with the government's unwillingness to implement a number of the recommendations which is being pressing. Some of those, of course, which related to children and school meals and the growth of obesity amongst children. But it's not only obesity at child level that's worrying us now. As Earl Russell mentioned, we have, and previously Baroness Bullis spoken frequently on this, we now see an increasing number of children with mental health problems relating to eating disorders, considerable growth in that area, and one of some quite big concern that needs addressing. These come, I believe, in many respects from a whole variety of reasons. What is causing the growth in mental health problems? Do we have more of it nowadays than we had previously? That is debatable. The causes are debatable too. But I think without any doubt, many of us would agree that social media has quite a significant impact on that. And that relates back to food and to body image and to appearance and to bullying and how people, younger people, are relating to each other on social media and leading to mental health problems. I personally believe that behind an awful lot of the mental health problems which we encounter with children, there is a fear of what they're encountering in life, and we come also fear of climate change is growing and worrying children, and we have to do all we can to try to address them. There's of course a poverty of food in many areas in the country, but I believe too that we have a poverty of spirit, and I think it's an important factor that we have to look to see whether, and this goes back to resilience and self-reliance, whether we are doing enough in schools to develop that self-reliance. And I was very heartened by much of the work which Baroness Bull described she's undertaking, and we look forward to the experimentation which is taking place in the northeast, and hopefully it's going to be successful. But I think we need to also move away from food. Quickly recall that Lord Layard helped Tony Blair and helped mental health very significantly by persuading them to introduce talking therapies. 22,000 people now employed on that for adults. Lord Layard has just done some recent work on addiction. Maybe he should do some work too with children, and we should look to see if we can have a greater expansion there at school levels. And I leave it now to my good friend and colleague to come in and speak with more authority about mental health than I can.
My Lords, I congratulate the noble lady, Baroness Bennett, for an excellent opening speech. I agree that our schools could do much more to prepare for the challenges of today. I declare my interest as founder and chair of a small mental health charity, Books Beyond Words, which I will mention briefly later. And until I became a member of your Lordship's House, I was a clinical academic psychiatrist, and I'd specialised in child and adolescent mental health and also in learning disability. Indeed, as a community psychiatrist, I regularly went into schools, special schools usually, to consult with teachers and to think with them about the needs of their children. Because I agree that prevention is better than waiting for a crisis. Like other noble lords, I've had briefings from a number of mental health charities who are working in schools to improve children's mental health, including Young Minds and Speech and Language UK. Briefings highlight that over 1/3 of children and young people with mental health needs also have special educational needs, including speech and language difficulties. This week is Emotional Health Week, promoted by the Centre for Emotional Health. Yesterday, their focus was on child development. My Lords, research clearly shows the impact that our relationships and emotional health in childhood, particularly in early childhood, but throughout the school years as well, will have on our future life chances. Last week, the Centre, in partnership with Demos, launched a paper called Strong Foundations, Why Everyone Needs Good Emotional Health and How to Achieve It. they made several recommendations, including that the Department for Education should develop evidence-based guidance for schools and colleges on how best to implement learning about emotional health. In other words, what I call emotional literacy. This report included a recognition of how picture books can support social and emotional learning for children. This resonates with me as the founder and chair of Books Beyond Words, because the charity works with artists. This is the organisation that I founded. It works with artists to create stories in pictures about the everyday challenges that children face. Recently, the charity has been working in a pilot group of schools to see how word-free books can support the emotional well-being of primary school children as well as young people with special educational needs, and to improve teacher confidence in talking about common mental health challenges. An independent evaluation found a strong causal link between the creative reading of word-free stories, usually in small groups, and pupil progress towards improved emotional well-being, stronger peer relationships, and an ability to express a range of feelings. Being able to recognise and express our feelings, such as anxiety, frustration, stress, can reduce the distressed or challenging behaviour which sometimes leads to the school exclusions highlighted by young minds. Exclusions are not the answer. Children with poor emotional health find it difficult to learn, and they are reluctant to go to school. So using pictures rather than words helps children of all ages and ability to engage with the topic and to express themselves. They can identify their feelings, discuss coping strategies, and be empowered to speak up for themselves. And after just one term of using word-free books once a week, 95% of pupils made progress towards being able to express and recognise a range of emotions. And case studies showed their attendance improved, and they had better than expected achievements in tests. All evidence of the importance of good emotional health. So I suggest that schools have a crucial role in fostering a nurturing environment and moving away from a punitive culture. Children need to feel comfortable and safe at school. School targets need to be more holistic. Ignoring well-being, my lords, doesn't lead to overall better outcomes. And schools need to adopt a whole school approach to mental health and well-being, which aims to promote mental well-being and to intervene early when common mental conditions present, such as depression, anxiety and self-harm. A whole school approach to mental health and well-being is a cohesive and collaborative action in and by a school community, strategically constructed with the school leadership, and this is really important. School leadership has to be on board. And they need an ethos that promotes respect and diversity. The curriculum and the teaching should help children and young people to develop their resilience and support their social and emotional learning. We know that childhood is a period of extraordinary potential. Get it right, and we're investing in the whole of society. We know that adverse childhood experiences are key predictors of poor physical and mental health and well-being throughout a person's life. We know that prevention is better than cure. And I consider that a child's emotional well-being and mental health cannot be considered in isolation from their school environment and the culture within that school. There's burnout in some school staff, recruitment and retention issues, school staff reporting that they feel unequipped to manage the mental health needs of their pupils. There are high levels of persistent absence, and we know that young people who are absent from school are more likely to have a mental disorder. Therefore, a punitive approach is rarely the answer to poor school attendance. Let me tell you about Sarah. She started to struggle with her mental health when she started secondary school. She was involved in a car accident over the summer holidays. She became increasingly anxious about leaving her home. She'd already been finding school difficult. She started missing days at school. And when she did manage to get to school, she was told off by teachers for her poor attendance. which made it more difficult to attend. Nobody asked her why it was so difficult to go to school. Her anxiety got worse, as did her attendance. And then her parents were being asked to pay fines because of her poor attendance. She's now been out of school for a year and remains on a waiting list for CAMS. So what are the solutions? Well, I don't have time really to talk about them, but I agree, schools need to be more fun. But they also need to be more real, addressing the things that really matter to children and young people. Thank you.
Opportunity to speak briefly in the gap. I did put this debate in my diary but failed to put down my name to speak. A schoolboy error for which I deserve extensive detention. Could I declare my interest as an advisor to Common Sense Media, a US not-for-profit which focuses on protecting kids from the harms of the internet, and I'm also a trustee of its UK charity. Can I congratulate Baroness Bennett on her calling this excellent debate? And I agreed with a huge amount of what she said. There was a tantalising moment when she said that the classroom remains a Victorian construct, and I couldn't agree with her more. In fact, it's a line I trot out regularly at the kind of London dinner parties that Liz Truss has taken randomly to so disparaging, because I do find it astonishing, and this is not being rude in any shape or form to our educators and teachers, that the classroom structure hasn't moved on for 150 years. And there is a great debate to be had in this chamber at another time, calling on the huge expertise that exists here about how we reconstruct education, the purpose of the classroom, the use of technology, paradoxically, to provide personalised curriculums to allow children to proceed at their own pace, the role of exams. I'm prepared to be as radical as possible. I, for one, for example, would abolish school uniform. But that is a whole other debate. I wanted really to focus in the short time I have on two brief issues. My noble friend Lord Effingham, I heard at the end of his speech, mention the mobile phone. Social media is the great issue now that faces our children in school and obviously outside school as well. It's the biggest impact on children's well-being and mental health in the last 10 years. A lot of it can be for the good, but we know that children are bombarded with content and text messages and inappropriate content. More girls far more than boys, the opportunity for bullying. Common Sense Media, for example, provides a digital curriculum. We've constructed a partnership with the NSPCC to promote that curriculum in schools, and it is about educating parents, but it's also about helping children become savvy digital citizens, and above all, of course, helping teachers who are behind the curve, understandably, from their own pupils in terms of how technology is used. It's an absolutely vital issue and should be front and centre of our thinking. And the second issue I want to concentrate on, which was so ably covered in such detail by the noble Baroness Bull, who knows so much about this subject, is the role of the arts and creativity in our schools and education. I stand guilty as charged as the arts minister who couldn't save some of the creative programmes that were set up by the previous Labour government. They were the most vulnerable when it came to having to reduce our budget. But one scheme I was able to save by working with the Department of Education on music education was the astonishing In Harmony scheme, which I always is one of the most emotional things I've ever been to. It is about exactly what noble lords are talking about. It wasn't about learning music, it was about learning confidence. It was about kids aged 9 and 10 being able to educate their own parents about what they were learning and gaining enormous confidence from being able to perform like that. And I do applaud the government in focusing on the rigour of reading and maths, and I accept that Nick Gibb can be proud that we are moving up the league tables in how well our kids are now reading and how well they're doing at maths. Those are the building blocks of education and success in life. But creativity is a fantastic way of building confidence, of building academic rigour. And it is, as I think the noble Baroness Morris said, a space to think. And above all, it's a route for kids who are not suited necessarily to the academic path to find a way forward. I was always a great sceptic of free school meals, and I've completely done a volte-face on that as well. Because again, if you've got kids in school from 5 to 18, feeding them well and feeding them properly has to be, as they say, a no-brainer, and sport as well. So my message would be, it's called the soft stuff, but it's unbelievably important.
I too want to thank Baroness Bennett for securing this very important debate. Lord Vasey would be pleased to know that in Everton Ward, one of the most deprived communities in Liverpool, they're celebrating, which I've been invited, 10 years in harmony, and it's been life-changing for some of those young people. I'm going to change what I was going to say. I think, for starters, Lord Hampton, you ought to have been a primary teacher. No two ways about it. I look back, it's only, 9, nearly 10 years ago that I was head of a 3-form-entry primary school in Liverpool, outside of Liverpool, a place called Knowsley. 500 pupils, one of the most deprived communities in the country. We had 96% attendance. The children wanted to come to school. They were enthusiastic. We had, science trails with parents, technology days. All the children from year 3 to year 6 went away, either a weekend or a full week in the Isle of Wight. Parents did all sorts of things for the school, raised huge amounts of money. This was a deprived community, by the way, again. You just couldn't... I look back and think, what sadly went wrong? And by the way, this school had 3 Ofsted inspections. We were a good school for all 3 of them. Their results were above the national. This is not me boasting. This is due to the teachers and pupils of that school. And by the way, Baroness Bull, we didn't get an arts mark, but we did get an arts gold mark. So, and one of my very average teachers was doing a literacy lesson when the inspector came for the arts mark, and I was thinking, oh no. And when she came back and said to me that line, you haven't got an arts mark, you've got a gold arts mark, I said, whew. And she said, I went to the best lesson I've ever seen. That teacher doing the literacy lesson with percussion instruments. And I thought, wow, I've underestimated him. He was brilliant. He rose to the occasion. All that enthusiasm that the pupils wanted to learn. They wanted to come into school. 97% of our pupils went to the local secondary school. The links were absolutely fantastic. And it wasn't just my school. The 5 other primary schools and the Church of England primary school all worked together. The local authority gave us support when we were in difficulty. We supported each other. I just don't know why we have lost all that. So turning, as we do, to mental health, we've heard several members talk about the alarming mental health statistics of our children and young people. There are 2 sets of statistics which have not been mentioned. The number of young people now, terribly sadly, taking their own lives. The number is increasing every year. The number of young people self-harming, the number is increasing every year. The number of young people having eating disorders, increasing every year. And the other statistic which really got to me from all the ones we've mentioned, and really concerns me, that 10% of children aged 5 to 16 these children had been clinically diagnosed with having mental health problems. 70% of those children and young people had not had appropriate interventions at sufficiently an early age. And it makes you realise that had we actually intervened early on, as early as we possibly could, because we had the support mechanisms there, we might have prevented some of the problems that we face further down the line. It's a bit like the sort of discussions we used to have about special educational needs, wasn't it? If we can diagnose autism or dyslexia at an early stage, we can intervene and do something about it. Well, the same should be true of mental health. When the Minister replies, I am sure she will tell us the resources the government are spending on mental health, and that is to be welcomed and to be applauded. But we are facing a mental health emergency, and the current situation, there's a huge hole in the current provision of mental health. Last year, less than half, 44% of the 1.5 million children that needed additional support hadn't received a CAMS appointment. The report conducted last year by the Children's Commissioner found the average waiting time in England between referral and the start of treatment is the highest it's been for 2 years. And 35% of those classified with high psychological distress have said they have not received the support they sought. And Bernardo's point out that in particular children with moderate mental health issues are falling through the gaps as they are considered too acute for intervention from the mental health services but do not meet the threshold, I think it was a point that my noble friend Baroness Tyler made, for CAMS. One of the ways that schools have been helping children and young people with mental health problems is through online tutoring, particularly those children with special educational needs, particularly some children who are in alternative provision, particularly some children who are home educated. That scheme comes to an end this summer with the £200 million not going back into education but being returned to the Treasury. I think that is a lost opportunity. I know that the tutoring programme was brought in during COVID, but it has been immensely successful, helped huge numbers of children, particularly those in deprived communities. And I wonder if the Minister would agree to look at how we can keep that programme. Saying, oh, it can be provided from the pupil premium is just not an answer. Pupil premiums are already overstretched, and actually some of the pupil premium money in many schools is used for mental health support. So what should we do in this mental health emergency? My noble friend Earl Russell told us what we would do. We'd put a statutory duty on every state-funded school to make provision for an education mental health practitioner or a school counsellor. A mental health practitioner means a person with a graduate or postgraduate level qualification accredited by Health Education England. For schools with 100 or fewer pupils, the duty may be satisfied by a collaborative provision between schools. We also need urgent financing, training and provision for CAMS staff, and indeed for school support, whether it comes from the school psychological service or it comes from speech therapists. We know that children with speech and language challenges are twice as likely to have difficulties with mental health. I'm sure many colleagues will have received numerous briefings from charities and professional bodies, and I thank them. I was particularly taken with Mental Health Foundation, who had a very pupil-focused approach with clear school-based actions, school anti-bullying programmes, whole school approach that Baroness Hollins mentioned, targeted programmes, implementation of trauma-informed approach, supporting the most, not come across the word, supporting the most minoritised pupils, marginalised, looking at comparable studies in other countries and learning from the experiences of young people themselves, with a remarkable quote from one young person saying, "Despite the profound impact on individuals and communities, mental health remains largely undervalued and shrouded in silence." I want to end with a comment the Minister made in the Select Committee report on the 11 to 18 curriculum. As was pointed out, sadly all those recommendations were rejected by government. Baroness Barron said, "Exams are a great leveller, whatever a pupil's origin or level of disadvantage. Exams may or may not be a great leveller, but they are also very stressful. We have more tests, more exams for our children and young people than any other country in the world. Perhaps our schools, which are target-driven, need to be more focused on a child-centred approach, which would certainly help with mental health issues." I want to end by repeating that quote again from that young person. Despite the profound impact on individuals and communities, mental health remains largely undervalued and shrouded in silence.
My Lords, this has been a truly interesting and varied debate, and I would like to join others in congratulating the Noble Lady Baroness Bennett for securing this debate. There can be nothing more important in a child's development than ensuring they have good mental and physical health, not least in what many noble lords have noted is a complex and often confusing world. Children need a healthy, caring, constructive, lively and varied school environment of the type to which the noble lady referred in her opening remarks. As the noble Lord Earl Russell said, good mental health is a prerequisite for learning, and my noble friend Lord Tuig powerfully articulated the need for children to have the confidence to succeed. I would also wholeheartedly agree with the comments by my noble friend Baroness Morris that academic education and mental health and well-being shouldn't be seen as being in competition with each other. I'm very much in the camp that believes schools should prepare children for life and work, and liked my noble friend Baroness Morris's articulation of how this might be balanced in relation to exams and how people view exam success and failure. I do not, however, think this excludes fun or creativity. I agreed wholeheartedly with the noble lady Baroness Bull's view on the need for creative arts to be a key part of school life and the lives of students. And the Right Reverend Prelate, the Bishop of Chichester, also spoke powerfully to this point, as did the noble lady Baroness Hollins on the work of the charity Books Beyond Words. My noble friend Baroness Bake hasn't spoken in this debate, but I understand she did great work as leader of Leeds, ensuring all children had access to learning a musical instrument. And this is a type of thing that can really enrich children's lives and make school life much more rewarding. I found the noble Earl Effingham's contribution on physical activity and food very compelling, and clearly the quality of food in school is an issue my noble friend Lord Brooke has campaigned on with vigour, not least on sugar, and will continue to do so. I think, my lords, from what we've heard today, none of us can be in any doubt that we have a huge mental health crisis among children and young people. And as the noble Lord Hampton also made clear, schools have a very distinct role in identifying and triaging issues. But schools and teachers do an incredible work in a difficult environment, and schools are sometimes struggling to meet the needs of their students. Teachers don't always have the support they need or the time or expertise to identify and deal with student mental health issues. And CAMS cannot deal with the scale of demand with unacceptable delays for treatment that risk an individual's mental health issues escalating. I think I do want to go back to the noble Lord Hampton's point about the focus on fun, and just to say I think probably all of us want to visit your school now, so expect a queue to do that. Yeah, exactly. And you don't have to become a primary school teacher, you can carry on as you are. The noble Earl Russell mentioned the need for a whole school approach, as did others. But I think what we need really, and I'd welcome the noble lady and minister's thoughts on this, is how we get a better whole system approach, because surely that is what is needed to address this issue. There's a clear need for the government to drive forward and work much more on a cross-departmental basis. The NHS, individual schools, charities or local authorities cannot solve the child mental health crisis alone. The noble Lord Way spoke about the need for school pathways to be made clearer and simpler for parents and children, and I'd be interested in the noble lady's reflection on his point about the correlation with decisions parents might make on homeschooling. My lords, I just want to give a personal view of an amazing meeting I had this week with a fabulous group of students from the Art King Solomon Academy in Edgware. It was a reminder of how a good school can provide a truly nurturing environment. The students spoke to me about the mental health provision in their school with their vice principal and the charity Place to Be, whose services the young people had accessed. They told me that COVID had led to isolation, that they needed more clubs and activities to improve their well-being, and that PHSE could do so much more than it does currently to help young people understand their mental health and how to deal with any issues they might face. They also said that often their parents didn't know how to help, so that parents also needed additional support to help deal with the issue. The provision the students had accessed had given them a sense of belonging and a trusted space. But there was, they said, a need for more provision so students didn't have to wait to access services. The students were hugely articulate in how they spoke about their experience and the need for young people to build resilience, and I've no doubt their school and their parents are incredibly proud of them. After they met me, they went to number 10 to deliver a letter to the Prime Minister. I'd be really grateful if the Noble Lady of the Minister would ensure that it reaches the right person for a response. My Lords, we can't talk about the role of schools in mental health without discussing the wider context. A number of Noble Lords have mentioned the scale of the problem, including the Noble Lord Stirling, who noted the rise, which means that on average, 5 children in a class of 30 are likely to have mental health issues. He also noted the recruitment crisis in specialists. The Noble Lady Baroness Tyler asked what I think is probably the most valid question in the whole debate, which is what is going on? In 2022, 1.4 million children were referred to CAMHS, with 270,000 children waiting longer than 3 months to begin treatment. The Local Government Association has found that at least 1 in 6 children and young people aged 7 to 16 have a probable mental health disorder, which increases to 1 in 4 for young people aged 17 to 19. The Children's Commissioner, who's been quoted a number of times, has raised particular concerns around older teenage girls, as she found in her report last year that nearly 2 in 5 of 16 to 17-year-old girls were unhappy with their mental health. Where things go wrong, where children and young people don't get support in a timely way, this can lead to forced hospitalisation. In the worst cases, unresolved mental health issues lead to self-harm and attempted or successful suicide, as highlighted by the Noble Lord Story in his remarks. Children living in poverty, where parents separate or have a financial crisis, or children whose own parents have poor mental health or poor health, are even more likely to have poor mental health themselves. As my noble friend Lord Tewig has said, children with speech and language difficulties are twice as likely to have a mental health issue than their peers. And the Noble Lady Baroness Hollins also highlighted this point. This is also the case for children and young people with a wide range of other special needs, physical illness or disabilities. Can the Noble Lady, the Minister, say what the government view is on how provision is currently tailored towards the needs of different groups of children, and what more can be done to ensure children and young adults get access in a timely way? To tackle an issue of this scale, you surely need a thorough understanding of what needs to be addressed. And with apologies to the Noble Lord Vasey, I personally don't think the policy should be made routinely at London dinner parties. Can the Noble Lady, the Minister, clarify whether the government intends to start to routinely collect statistics on mental provision in schools, including the type of provision and therapy provided? And this should include, as the Noble Earl Russell asked, a cross-referencing of this with other data, including absenteeism. If not, can the Noble Lady tell the House when the government at the very least intends to carry out a new survey, given that it is almost a decade since the last one found that only 62% of schools offered counselling services, although I do understand that this has risen. Can the Noble Lady, the Minister, provide information on how many schools do now have counselling services? Is the government, like Labour, committed to specialist mental health support for children and young people in every school? Furthermore, can the government provide a demographic breakdown of the number of children accessing mental health services in schools and through CAMHS? Finally, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm clear that the government knows that there's a problem, but I don't feel that they've yet managed to introduce a comprehensive solution. And the proposed ban on phones in schools is evidence of this. And many of my noble lords have referenced social media and phones. However, as many schools have already introduced this, and head teachers have noted they cannot control their use out of school. Having heard today's debate, what more is the Noble Lady the Minister able to commit to the government doing to address this epidemic of mental health issues in children and young people, both in and out of school, to ensure our young people get the support they need to thrive both socially, academically, through their childhoods to successful adult lives.
My Lords, may I start by congratulating the Noble Lady Baroness Bennett for securing this important debate, and to thank all Noble Lords for their contributions. I feel a long letter coming on, so I will do my best to cover the points raised, but I feel pretty confident I won't get through all of them. If I may, I felt very uncomfortable listening to the opening speech of the Noble Lady Baroness Bennett, and I was trying to think why as I listened, and trying not to be defensive, as I listened to other speeches. And what I heard from your lordships today is what I hear often going around the country, which is my school is fantastic. My children's school, my grandchildren's school, the school I teach in is fantastic, but quote unquote, the system is broken. The system is made up of all of those brilliant schools with brilliant teachers in, heroic generation of children. And I think at our peril do we have such a negative tone about our education system and our schools, who are doing an amazing job all around the country. And I think one of the reasons that they're doing so well, there are many reasons, but I'll just pick on a few. The first is that this country has been the first country to really be led by the evidence of what works, not what we think works, not what we feel might work, but what the evidence actually shows works in the country. And all of us in this House know that it is a great deal easier to write policy than it is to implement it well. And the focus that has been placed on what actually works in practice, I think, is absolutely critical. And I would really encourage your lordships to look at the difference in what is happening in our schools in England and schools in Scotland and schools in Wales. And I think my case rests. We used evidence in relation to curriculum, in relation to extracurricular activities, in relation to pedagogy, in relation to behaviour. And for those noble lords who question the importance of attainment, attainment in itself is an incredibly important protective factor for our children's mental health. The Noble Lord Story talked about a sense that music had been lost in our schools and other cultural activities. And I really, as your lordships know, because I mention it often at the dispatch box because it's true, but every week I go and visit schools, and every week I see what's happening on the ground. The Noble Lady talked about schools being forced into trust. The schools that go into trust because they are sponsored schools have failed the community of children that they are serving, and for whatever reasons needs support. And I'm well aware that frequently parents and children and staff are concerned at the time of transfer, but visit those schools a year later. I went to a school in Liverpool and I said to the children, it was a year to the day they'd been sponsored, I said, tell me what it was like a year ago, what's the difference? And the child said to me, you wouldn't have felt safe in the corridor, miss. And our children need to feel safe in the corridor and much more. She also talked about what mountain she was going to climb, kind of metaphorically speaking, so it wasn't just about corridors. And then finally, I'd just like to pick up the sense of this very critical and kind of forbidding tone that schools apparently, your lordships suggest, are using in communicating with parents and communicating with children. I absolutely understand that there are times when enforcement is important, but everything we're doing and everything I see in schools starts with support and starts with encouragement and starts to work out where is a child going to thrive and flourish and what are the strengths of that individual child. that can be built on. I sense that Baroness Twycross had the same sense when she visited or met with the children from the ARC school the other day, and I will do my very best to make sure that they get a speedy response to their letter. Turning to attendance, which a number of your lordships, the Noble Lady Baroness Bennet, the Noble Earl Russell, and the Noble Lord Hampton talked about in relation to attendance. And I'd just like to thank the Noble Lord Hampton for really underlining the point about how attendance is so important for the safety of our children. And I would urge those noble lords who are worried about the policy in relation to fines to just look at the guidance that we've produced for schools and its emphasis on support, and actually talk to schools, because their concern when I talk to them is about inconsistency in implementation of fines for non-attendance rather than the policy itself. And I would absolutely agree that mild anxiety becomes much greater anxiety for the majority of children if they miss significant amounts of school. So we're working incredibly hard on attendance, both in relation to the most vulnerable children, where we've extended our attendance mentor programme, but also our attendance hubs, which we will have 32 of them, which will mean that 2,000 schools will be helped to tackle persistent absence with that peer-to-peer support. And we are also doing a great deal of work analysing the data around attendance. And as I said in response to a question earlier this week, we are seeing green shoots in relation to attendance this term, particularly in primary, but also in Year 7 in secondary. But our real focus, and I think this was something that the Noble Lady Baroness Morris, I always enjoy particularly listening to her reflections on education, we need to focus on what schools can do and not ask them to do things they can't do. So our real focus is, I think the Noble Lady talked about giving confidence back to children, but I think we also need to make sure that teachers feel confident and school leaders feel confident in their approach. Turning to some of the wider issues in the debate, the Noble Baroness Lady Twycross anticipated well that I would acknowledge that there had been a rise in mental health issues and a worrying rise needing specialist support. And of course, teachers and school staff are not mental health specialists. The Noble Lady Baroness Morris and the Noble Earl Russell referred to the rollout of the mental health support teams. We are extending those teams to an estimated 44% of pupils and learners by the end of this financial year, and at least 50% by the end of March 2025. Our original plans that the Noble Earl questioned have been accelerated, but these are genuinely new and additional staff, and so it does take time to recruit and train them, but we see it as an absolute priority. Today's debate does show how crucial it is that we support schools, but we also recognise that they have a real role in creating a safe and calm and supportive environment for pupils, where pupils want to attend, where they're able to learn and flourish, and that is particularly important for the most vulnerable children. And I'd like to acknowledge there the remarks of the Noble Lady Baroness Tyler and the Noble Lady Baroness Hollins, and thank her for all the work she does, particularly in relation to children with learning difficulties. And our school's role in promoting this environment and offering a really rich and varied experience that encourages the creativity that your lordships talked about, the activity and development through a broad and balanced curriculum, but also a high quality enrichment offer, is incredibly important. And schools are and should be places where children can experience joy. Doesn't say fun in my speech, but I agree on fun, and find good and respectful communities, and have the experiences that build their resilience and build their sense of well-being. The Noble Lady Baroness Twycross asked about how we can flex that to make sure that it's always reflective of particular needs and particular individual pupils. And that really, I think, is rooted in having the kind of culture which is watching out for every child every day and making sure that those relationships that the Noble Lady Baroness Morris talked about are in place, and children feel able to come forward and talk, but also teachers spot their needs. Good behaviour is critical in assuring that there is a safe environment that children will feel happy to go to, and that's why the government has put such emphasis on high expectations around behaviour. And many of your lordships have quoted the Children's Commissioner, but I know from having spoken to her that it is particularly the children with special educational needs and disabilities, it is particularly the vulnerable children who need to feel safe in school, who need and who particularly thrive when they feel safe in school. And certainly talking to school leaders, they emphasise that it's not just in lessons, but crucially in unstructured time, where Lord Hampton is standing by the edge of the playground spotting stuff. It's that unstructured time where children need to feel safe and need to know absolutely what the expectations are on their behaviour, but also, to the Noble Lord Tuig's point, that children feel they have a part in this, that they have a sense of agency. The Noble Lord referred to the work of Place to Be, who I know well and admire even more. But that sense of pupil leadership, councils and so on, contributing to the culture of the school, particularly around behaviour, is extremely important. We've set those things out in our behaviour guidance. We've also established behaviour hubs that are supporting 750 schools, and we've also introduced a behaviour and culture national professional qualification for teachers. A number of your lordships, my noble friends Lord Stirling and Lord Way and others, spoke about children with special educational needs, and they're right that we absolutely need to emphasise earlier identification. We're working to reduce the adversarial nature of the system and putting in support for school staff, integrating in the initial teacher training and the early careers framework a much greater focus on special educational needs and disabilities in teacher training. I would, the Noble Lord, Lord Tuig, spoke about speech and language, which is an important area of focus and obviously is one of the priority areas for the practice guidance in the SEND improvement plan. I'd be delighted to meet with Speech and Language UK. My noble friend Lord Stirling and the noble Lord Story talked about, among others, spoke about access to CAMS. The young people's mental health workforce has increased by 46% since the NHS long-term plan started in 2019, but I absolutely accept your lordship's reflections and the feedback I get when I talk to schools that may have increased, but schools still feel like that is a very hard service to access. Turning to enrichment, the department is committed to ensuring young people have access to great extracurricular opportunities. The Noble Lady Baroness Bull talked about the importance of partnerships, and she will know that we are testing ways to increase local coordination of enrichment activities across schools through our Enrichment Partnerships pilot, which is a joint project between the Department for Education and DCMS. And that's in addition to our work with DCMS to make sure children get the most from the National Youth Guarantee, which supports children to have access to regular out-of-school activities. And in particular, we're working together to offer the Duke of Edinburgh's Award to all mainstream secondary schools in England by 2025, which perhaps offers some of the blood, sweat and tears, which the Noble Lord Hampton referred to, hopefully no violence though. The Noble Lady Baroness Bull and the Right Reverend Prelate, the Bishop of Chichester, spoke about the importance of cultural education, as did my noble friend Lord Vasey. And that's obviously part of a rich school experience, including wider arts, music and creative subjects, and that's why we're investing £115 million in cultural education up to 2025. Turning to sport, I absolutely hear the importance that my noble friend the Earl of Effingham and the Noble Lord Hampton place on sport. We are going to publish non-statutory guidance this spring illustrating how schools will be able to provide 2 hours of PE and equal access. And as someone who swam in very cold water this morning and try to every morning, I totally agree with the Noble Lord about the impact on one's mood. It is hard to get out of cold water without feeling better. Unless you stay in too long, of course, but that's for another debate. The Noble Lord Brooke of Alverthorpe raised, as did my noble friend the Earl of Effingham, the importance of school food, and I wondered whether I might offer the Noble Lord a meeting outside the chamber and perhaps update him on some of the work the department's doing in this area. We do now include cooking and nutrition as part of the national curriculum in design and technology, and is mandatory in key stages 1 to 3, and introduced in 2016 a new GCSE in food preparation and nutrition. My noble friend Lord Way asked about what we're doing to support home education, and we do remain committed to introducing statutory local authority registers for children not in school, but also a duty for local authorities to provide support for home educating parents, and I absolutely recognise some of the issues he raises in relation to children with special educational needs and disabilities. In conclusion, my lords, I wanted to just also touch, in honour of the noble lady's green genes, that, as the noble lady knows, we are doing a great deal in schools with our climate change and sustainability strategy, which sets out a number of initiatives from early years through school into college, which really are designed to get people into nature and children and inspire them by spending time in nature, giving them the tools to plan and develop climate action plans for their school and their community, and then act on those. So we really believe that connection with nature is also so important in relation to their mental health. I think your lordships will have felt quite how strongly I feel about how much our schools are doing to support our children and their mental health. As your lordship's speeches underlined, there's no single thing that's going to address this problem. There isn't a silver bullet, but that combination of engaging curricular and extracurricular activities, making sure that we protect avenues for student voice and agency, all will contribute, combined with having specialist wellbeing and mental health support, and that needs to be underpinned by a firm and supportive behaviour policy where children feel safe and thrive, and where teachers feel fulfilled. I guess the bit I really do agree with the Noble Lady, Lady Bennett, on is on Yeats and lighting the fire. I think we do that through those things and through the relationships the Noble Lady Baroness Morris alluded to, but unlike the Noble Lady, I think that's exactly what our schools are doing.
My Lords, I thank the Noble Lady, the Minister, and everyone who's taken part in what I think has been a rich and deeply informative debate, and I might even say your Lordship's House at its best. I think I've got a couple of minutes, so I do want to respond and highlight some things that I think deserve particularly to be highlighted. I want to commend the Noble Lord Story for his courage in raising the issue of child suicide, because it's something that's very difficult to talk about and very disturbing, but I think it's important that it was raised in this debate, so thank you for that. And slightly more lightly, I want to say to the Noble Lord Vasey, no detention, I don't think, and I'm delighted to hear from the benches opposite such a radical idea of how we need to get away from Victorian schooling. Now, I want to particularly address the Noble Lord Hampton to accept his invitation. I believe I should be at the front of the queue, given it's clearly a long one. And perhaps also to apologise to the Noble Lord that maybe my speech didn't make it clear enough that what I was talking about is what's happening in a significant number of schools, but not by any means all schools, and also what I think is the direction of policy and ideology that's being pushed towards schools. And I would mention, for example, Space Studio West London, which I visited with Learn with the Lords, which struck me from my 2-hour visit as a very inclusive, very welcoming, very caring school that has really strong approaches. So yes, I have no doubt they exist, but I feel like they're having to run against the tide rather than being supported in the way that they should be. Now, to pick up some points from the Noble Lady, the Minister, the Noble Lady said that the department is operating on the basis of evidence of what works. But I think today, when we're talking about mental health, and I think the figures cited by the Noble Lady Baroness Tyler about children's experience of schools, those statistics really were deeply shocking about how children feel about schools. And that is evidence, and that evidence really needs to be taken into account. About schools being forced into trust, well, Ofsted is a whole other debate. And I think very importantly, what the Noble Lady said about the tone of dealing with parents. We've heard testimony from all round your Lordship's house, but particularly, I think, from the Noble Lord Way. Some of the words the Noble Lord said is there needs to be an approach of collaboration rather than confrontation, that targets for school attendance often mean being pushed to not act in children's best interests. I think those are very important testimony that really need to be listened to from experience. The Noble Lady Baroness Bull, joining also with the Right Reverend Prelate and others, talking about the importance of the arts and music. The Noble Lady gave her classic virtuoso performance, and I particularly liked the reference to how it's related to civic behaviours, voting and volunteering, etc., and the relationship of that to cultural education. Food, one of my favourite things. We didn't actually get the word microbiome in there, but thank you to everyone who brought that up, and it is a crucial issue. But I want to finish with just referencing two particular speeches. One, the Noble Lady Baroness Morris of Yardley, a very important, obviously very, very well-informed speech. And the word that I kept hearing again and again was pressure, and the pressure coming from exams. And I think that's a feeling that's been reflected right around your Lordship's house. That's how schools are suffering. And also, the way in which schools are not embedded in communities is the same way as they used to, and schools having to compete against each other. And I think the Noble Lord Story talked about cooperation and the importance of schools working as a network, not being set against each other in league tables, but working together. But finally, I want to go to the words of the Noble Lady Baroness Hollands. who of course doesn't bring any party axe to grind into your lordship's house, brings absolutely expert experience. And I think this really sums up a lot of the debate from all around all sides of your lordship's house. The noble lady said children need to feel safe in school. Ignoring well-being doesn't lead to better outcomes. And we need to be addressing the things that really matter. Now, I think that is the message that finish this debate with, and that really needs to be listened to by all sides of your lordship's house.
The question is that this motion be agreed to.